Remember her from Little House on the Prairie? Here's how she ended up. For decades, Little House on the Prairie painted the picture of wholesome family living, prairie sunsets, moral lessons, and neighbors who always found a way to patch things up by the end of the episode. But behind the curtain, real life was anything but simple. Fame hit some cast members like a storm, leading to broken marriages, career nosedives, money troubles, and feuds that stretched long after the cameras stopped rolling. The series that once symbolized innocence ended up being the backdrop for personal battles, public scandals, and messy Hollywood realities. And at the center of it all is one familiar face, the actress you remember most from the Prairie. The question now is, after all the chaos, where did life really take her? Join us as we get into all the details, all about Little House on the Prairie. Before it became a nostalgic classic, Little House on the Prairie started as a gamble. It was meant to be a simple historical drama, loosely inspired by Laura Ingalls Wilder's beloved books. But it grew into something bigger, a television phenomenon that shaped a generation. Set in the 1870s through the 1890s, the story followed the Ingalls family as they carved out a life on Plum Creek near Walnut Grove, Minnesota. Viewers tuned in week after week to watch Charles, Caroline, Laura, Mary, and little Carrie face the struggles of pioneer life. Michael Landon, Karen Grassel, Melissa Gilbert, Melissa Sue Anderson, and twins Lindsay and Sydney Greenbush gave those characters flesh and blood, turning them into household names. But the road to Walnut Grove wasn't as straightforward as the show made it seem. In 1972, television producer Ed Friendly, nudged by his wife and daughter, bought the rights to Wilder's novels and set the wheels in motion. He brought in writer Blanche Hanalis to craft the teleplay for what was supposed to be just a 2-hour pilot film. Then came Michael Landon, who agreed to direct the pilot, but only if he could also step into the boots of Charles Ingalls. At first, Friendly and Landon clashed over their visions for the show. The tension grew so intense that Friendly eventually walked away, leaving Landon with full creative control. From that moment on, the series bore his stamp. The pilot aired on March 30th, 1974, pulling its story directly from Wilder's Little House on the Prairie book. Its success sparked the birth of the weekly series, which officially premiered on NBC that September. For nearly a decade, until May 1982, it became a fixture in American living rooms. Even when Landon eventually bowed out in the 9th season and the title shifted to Little House, A New Beginning, the magic didn't fade. 3 follow-up movies carried the torch, and reruns kept the Prairie alive long after the final credits rolled. Critics, however, weren't impressed in the beginning. Early reviews dismissed it as a second-rate version of The Waltons, which was dominating ratings at the time. But audiences had the final word. Families fell in love with the wholesome storytelling, the sweeping frontier visuals, and the way each episode wrapped hardship in a lesson of hope. Over time, critics softened too, and by the end of its run, the series wasn't just a hit. It was a legacy. But while the series gave us wholesome moments, behind the scenes, things weren't all that wholesome for the casts. Karen Grassel, Caroline Ma Ingalls. For millions of viewers, Karen Grassel was the heartbeat of Little House on the Prairie. As Caroline Ma Ingalls, she was the moral compass of Walnut Grove, the steady hand guiding her children, the supportive partner to Charles, and the woman who held the family together no matter what hardship came knocking. But away from the prairie sunsets and cozy family dinners, Grassel's own story was far more complicated. It's one of personal battles, Hollywood clashes, and ultimately, redemption. Karen was born on February 25, 1942, in Berkeley, California, with a brain and a passion that would take her far beyond small-town life. By 1965, she had already graduated from UC Berkeley with degrees in English and dramatic art, and her talent earned her a coveted Fulbright to study at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art. In other words, she was trained for serious theater, not cornbread making on a prairie farm set. Yet fate has a way of twisting things. When she returned to the U.S., broke and discouraged, television came calling. She almost turned down the role of Caroline Ingalls, dismissing Ma as too prudish. But something shifted when she connected with the young actors playing the Ingalls children and felt the warmth of the story. Against her instincts, she signed on, and history was made. Michael Landon had auditioned over 47 women for the role before settling on her. Despite her limited TV experience, she carried the pioneer strength he was searching for. For 8 seasons, from 1974 to 1982, Grassel breathed life into Ma across 182 episodes. But behind the wholesome family scenes, things weren't nearly as sunny. Tension flared in Season 2 when she asked Landon for a raise. Instead of recognition, she was met with cold resistance. Landon, her boss, co-star, and the director shot her down, even hinting that audiences didn't really care that much about Caroline in the first place. From then on, she noticed her role shrinking and her once collaborative relationship with Landon turning icy. Worse still were the humiliations she endured on set. Grassel later described moments that would easily be called harassment today. During an intimate bedroom scene, Landon cracked crude jokes about how women smelt after sexual intercourse loudly, in front of the entire crew. Grassel sat frozen, powerless, and deeply humiliated. She remembered how he seemed to start a campaign to chip away at her confidence, breaking her down in front of others. At the time, she swallowed it as just work. But the scars stayed with her, and while she battled those professional challenges, another struggle raged quietly behind the scenes. Alcoholism. Grassel called herself a high-functioning alcoholic, able to show up, perform, and keep her lines sharp, only to drink heavily once the day wrapped. The spiral deepened until 1977, when a series of terrifying personal incidents forced her to confront the truth. That year, she made the decision to stop. She sought help, got sober, and committed herself to recovery. It was one of the hardest and most defining turning points of her life. Time has a way of softening old wounds, and Grassel eventually reconciled with Michael Landon before his death in 1991. They exchanged heartfelt letters and had real conversations, finally making peace after years of tension. By then, she had long moved on from Walnut Grove, throwing herself back into the theater she loved. She co-founded the Resource Theater Company in Santa Fe, performed at the Actors Theater of Louisville, and returned to her Bay Area roots to continue working in local productions. Offstage, her personal life carried its own weight. She married multiple times, adopted her son, Zach Radford, and spoke openly about the abortions she had in her 20s. Experiences that shaped her activism and her creative voice. These were not easy revelations, but Grassel has never shied away from honesty. Today, at 83, she's still very much a force. Living in the San Francisco Bay Area, she remains immersed in theater and performs regionally. In 2021, she released her memoir, Bright Lights, Prairie Dust, Reflections on Life, Loss, and Love from Little House's Ma. The book laid it all bare. Her childhood, her battle with alcoholism, her clashes with Landon, her resilience, and her ultimate healing. It was not a sanitized Hollywood tale, but a raw one, written with the same quiet strength that once defined Ma. Grassel has come to embody more than the role that made her famous. She's become a voice for women, for honesty, and for the messy, resilient truth of survival. She may always be remembered as Caroline Ingalls, but her life beyond Walnut Grove is where the real story unfolds. And yet, to truly understand her journey, you can't ignore the man whose shadow loomed over it all. Michael Landon, Charles Pa Ingalls. Michael Landon wasn't just the heart of Little House on the Prairie. He was its architect, its driving force, and the man who made America believe in the ideal of Pa Ingalls. But behind that image of a gentle pioneer father was someone far more complicated. Landon's story isn't just about fame and success. It's about control, scandal, and a life cut short at the height of his power. Born Eugene Maurice Orowitz on October 31, 1936 in Queens, New York, Landon didn't grow up with the warmth he later projected on screen. His mother battled severe depression and even attempted suicide in front of him, leaving scars that never really faded. Those early traumas hardened him, fueling the perfectionism and toughness that would later define his Hollywood career. At first, sports seemed like his ticket out. He was a standout javelin thrower, even earning attention for his athletic promise, until injury shut the door. Acting became the fallback. He reinvented himself with a new name, Michael Landon, and by the late 50s, he had cemented his place in television history as Little Joe Cartwright on Bonanza, a role he played for 14 years. When Bonanza ended, Landon didn't miss a beat. He created, produced, directed, and starred in Little House on the Prairie, a project that turned him into the model of American fatherhood. As Charles Ingalls, he embodied stoicism, compassion, and grit, the kind of dad who worked hard, loved harder, and always found the right words by the episode's end. But Landon wasn't just acting. He was running the entire show. He directed nearly 90 episodes, wrote over 40 scripts, and controlled the set down to the smallest detail. Cast members admired his work ethic. 12 to 16-hour days weren't unusual, but his authority also made him polarizing. Melissa Gilbert adored him, describing him as a second father. Karen Grassel, on the other hand, locked horns with him over money, respect, and his off-color humor. Behind the curtain, his personal life was far less wholesome than Pa Ingalls. During Little House, he began an affair with Cindy Clerico, a young makeup artist nearly 20 years his junior. The affair ended his 19-year marriage to Lynn No and shattered the public's image of him as the perfect family man. The tabloids feasted, and his children were left to deal with the collateral damage. Add to that his heavy drinking and constant cigarette habit, often spotted with both on set, and the cracks in his golden boy image only widened. Still, Landon powered through, keeping the machine of Little House running until 1983. His parting gift to NBC? Blowing up Walnut Grove in a dramatic finale. But Landon wasn't done. He quickly launched Highway to Heaven in 1984, a feel-good drama about an angel sent to Earth. It reunited him with Victor French, his longtime friend who had played Mr. Edwards, and together they carried the show until 1989. Landon also created Father Murphy and worked on TV movies, proving that he wasn't just a star. He was a television empire builder. Then in 1991, everything came crashing down. Landon was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, one of the deadliest cancers, and doctors gave him only months to live. Known for meeting life head-on, he went public with his diagnosis on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, telling America he planned to fight without self-pity. But the disease spread aggressively. Just 3 months later, on July 1, 1991, Michael Landon died at his Malibu home, surrounded by his family. He was only 54 years old. His legacy is tangled and enormous. He left behind 9 children and 3 of the most successful family dramas in TV history: Bonanza, Little House on the Prairie, and Highway to Heaven. For some, he remains the ultimate father figure, a man who brought moral clarity into their living rooms. For others, especially those who clashed with him, his perfectionism and flaws cast a shadow. Either way, he left an imprint that television has never really replicated. And yet, the story of Little House on the Prairie didn't end with him. For the children who grew up under his watchful eye on set, his influence was both a gift and a burden. Melissa Gilbert, Laura Ingalls. When you think of Little House on the Prairie, chances are the first face that flashes in your mind is Melissa Gilbert's. At just 9 years old, she beat out nearly 500 other girls to snag the role of Laura Ingalls in 1974, a role she carried for nearly a decade, until 1983. Week after week, she wasn't just America's half pint. She was the beating heart of Walnut Grove. Her performance was so unforgettable that by 1985 she'd become one of the youngest actors ever to be honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. But while Laura Ingalls was learning life lessons on the prairie, Melissa Gilbert was quietly collecting her own, ones that shaped her in ways far more complicated than the show ever revealed. On set, Melissa absorbed more than lines and camera cues. She picked up values, community, empathy, and resilience that became the foundation of her adult life. Yet behind the scenes, she was battling struggles nobody could see. One of the most haunting was misophonia, a condition that triggered intense emotional reactions to everyday sounds like chewing or tapping. As a child, she would flush red, drowning in guilt, convinced it was her fault. For years, she carried that invisible torment until later in life, when she finally learnt her suffering had a name. The moment she discovered it wasn't her fault, she broke down in tears of relief. Determined to fight back, she worked with Duke University's Center for Misophonia, enduring 16 weeks of grueling cognitive behavioral therapy. Today, she doesn't just manage the condition, she advocates for awareness, using her platform to give others the tools she never had as a child. But the emotional cracks in her life didn't end there. In a revelation that stunned fans, Melissa shared how her birth father, a musician, had recognized her instantly after watching her on Little House. Her biological mother had been an exotic dancer, and together they had given her up for adoption. For a girl who spent her life struggling with abandonment and belonging, that story of recognition hit hard. Adoption had left her constantly questioning her place, always chasing validation. In her memoir, Prairie, she described herself as living life as somebody's girl, always trying to prove she was lovable. That desperate need for approval, she later realized, was rooted in those earliest days, when she was literally passed between strangers before she ever had a chance to belong to anyone. As she grew older, those cracks widened into battles with addiction. After Little House, Melissa spiraled into dependency on prescription pills and alcohol. Therapy and a women's-only AA group eventually pulled her out of the cycle, but the road was far from smooth. Physically, she faced her share of battles too. She once performed an entire touring run of the Little House musical with a broken back before undergoing surgery in 2010 to repair it. In 2015, she made headlines again when she chose to have her breast implants removed, publicly embracing health and authenticity over Hollywood's obsession with perfection. Still, Gilbert never stepped away from the spotlight entirely. She remained active in television and film, even voicing Batgirl in Batman, the animated series. She circled back to the prairie in a full-circle moment, this time playing Ma on tour. Beyond acting, she stepped into leadership, serving as president of the Screen Actors Guild from 2001 to 2005. In 2016, she even tried her hand at politics, running for Congress in Michigan's 8th District. Though spinal health issues forced her to withdraw, writing became another outlet for her reinvention. In 2009, she released Prairie, her unflinching memoir that laid bare her wild party years, addictions, and inner struggles. Then in 2022, she returned with Back to the Prairie, a home remade, a life rediscovered. This time, the story was about healing. She wrote about leaving behind Hollywood flash for a quiet life in a Catskills cabin, gardening, renovating, and finding peace in simplicity. Around the same time, she launched Modern Prairie, a lifestyle brand aimed at older women searching for authenticity and empowerment. These days, Melissa Gilbert has traded red carpets for chicken coops, moving first to Michigan in 2013 and eventually settling in the New York Catskills. She raises chickens, tends a garden, and lives a life that feels worlds away from Hollywood. She has also embraced aging on her own terms, rejecting endless surgery and celebrating the woman she sees in the mirror. Family, not fame, now defines her world. Between her and her husband, she cherishes being a grandmother to 8 grandchildren. Her days filled with backgammon, gardening, and the joy of domestic rituals that once might have felt too ordinary for a Hollywood star. But while Gilbert found her peace by stepping away from the spotlight, another Little House alum's journey looked very different. Melissa Sue Anderson. Mary Ingalls. Melissa Sue Anderson never set out to be America's prairie sweetheart. She wanted to be a dancer, but fate, nudged by her dance teacher, shifted her course. Acting quickly, she replaced ballet shoes with cameras. Commercials and small TV parts came first, including a standout as Millicent on the Brady Bunch. Then, at just 11 years old, she beat out dozens of girls for the role that would change her life forever. Mary Ingalls on Little House on the Prairie. Mary wasn't designed to be central at first, but everything changed with Season 1's The Raccoon. Anderson's raw emotion in that episode floored producers. And suddenly, Mary was no longer a background sister. She was one of the show's beating hearts. Her depth didn't just help define the storylines, it made history. In 1978, she became the only cast member ever nominated for a Primetime Emmy, recognized for Outstanding Lead Actress in a drama series. But with prominence came pain. Mary Ingalls became the writer's go-to vessel for tragedy. Scarlet fever, blindness, the loss of a child in a fire, and even a descent into catatonia. Each season, the heartbreak piled higher. Anderson once joked that the writers seemed to ask themselves, "What can we do to Melissa Sue that's really awful?" By Season 7, the weight was unbearable. Playing a blind character boxed her in dramatically, forcing her into endless repetition. She later confessed, "I was blind and boring," a sharp frustration at how Mary had devolved into little more than perpetual sadness. The decision became clear. She had to walk away. After Season 7, Anderson's appearances became rare, and her exit from Walnut Grove was as quiet as it was deliberate. Even so, her commitment to authenticity was unwavering. She spent time at the Foundation for the Junior Blind to ensure her portrayal rang true, even though the 19th century setting kept Mary stuck in limited roles. On set, she stood apart, too. While the rest of the cast bonded like family, Anderson often kept her head down, focused entirely on work. Fans noticed her serious, almost solitary presence, less the bubbly child star, more the consummate professional. Once the Prairie chapter closed, Anderson still found her way into guest roles in TV movies. The Equalizer, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and others. But her most defining role unfolded off-screen. In 1990, she married television producer Michael Sloan. Their daughter Piper came in 1991 and son Griffin in 1996. With motherhood, her priorities shifted entirely. She consciously stepped back, determined her kids would grow up with their own identities, not as extensions of celebrity parents. She explained that she really stepped away for a long time, so they would have their own sense of who they were. That choice redefined everything. In 2002, the family relocated to Montreal, leaving Hollywood for a quieter, steadier life. By 2007, they were Canadian citizens, embracing a new chapter defined by privacy, not press. Still, Anderson never severed ties completely. She resurfaced occasionally, appearing in the 2006 miniseries 10.5. Apocalypse, surprising fans with cameos in Veronica Mars, 2014, and The Con Is On, 2018. But by then, acting was no longer survival, it was optional, something she dipped into on her own terms. In 2010, she gave fans her unfiltered truth with her memoir, The Way I See It, A Look Back at My Life on Little House. The book laid out the highs of child stardom, the endless demands of Mary's tragedies, and the liberation of walking away. Now, in 2025, Melissa Sue Anderson lives quietly in Canada, rarely joining cast reunions or giving interviews. And that's exactly how she likes it. But while Anderson chose distance, two of her youngest castmates began their Hollywood journey before they could even form memories of it. Lindsay and Sydney Greenbush, Carrie Ingalls. On May 25, 1970, Hollywood welcomed a pair of twins who were destined for the screen. Lindsay and Sydney Greenbush, daughters of actor Billy Greenbush and Carol K. Bush. Stardom came shockingly early. By 1973, they were already appearing in the TV movie Sunshine, and not long after, they were whisked into a role that would define their childhoods. Carrie Ingalls on Little House on the Prairie. They were just 3 years old when Michael Landon cast them, alternating as Carrie from 1974 to 1982 under the joint credit Lindsay Sydney Greenbush. Audiences only occasionally saw them side by side, like in the whimsical episode The God Sister. Otherwise, the trick of swapping them out kept the workload bearable for two toddlers suddenly living life in front of cameras. Carrie was sweet, wide-eyed, and unforgettable, but she was never given much of a voice. Most of the time, the character was stuck in the background, trotted out for the occasional cute reaction or small moment of distress. Even the twins noticed the limits of their role. Lindsay once admitted that Landon didn't exactly make the experience fun, confessing she was always petrified of making a mistake. Fans felt it too. On forums, viewers have shared their frustrations over the years, that Carrie was either portrayed as a damsel in distress or played for laughs, with almost no growth as she got older. Some called it a wasted opportunity, pointing out how easily she could have been developed into more than just a background Ingalls. There were also the realities of being twins in Hollywood. Casting directors hesitated to choose between them for new projects, worried about hurting feelings or creating rifts. So while Carrie may have been beloved by audiences, it boxed both girls into a corner from the start. When Little House ended in 1982, Lindsay and Sydney briefly dipped back into acting before stepping away altogether. In 1983, Lindsay appeared in Matt Houston, while Sydney landed a role in the film Hambone and Hilly. But by the time they graduated from Santa Monica High School in 1988, both had chosen to close the door on child stardom. Lindsay took a practical path at first, studying accounting in college, before her heart pulled her toward a quieter, more unconventional life. In 1993, she relocated to Taos, New Mexico, where she welcomed her daughter, Caitlin Danai, from a short-term relationship. Eventually, she returned to California and poured her energy into horses, becoming a trainer and even working as a boxing coach for youth at Kid Gloves Boxing in Simi Valley. Her personal story also came full circle in a way, straight out of a TV script. In 2014, she married Daniel Sanchez, the boy who had once sneaked onto the Little House set as a teenager. They exchanged vows under the same tree where they first met, turning nostalgia into a real-life love story. Lindsay later returned briefly to the stage in 2018, joining fellow Little House alum Allison Arngrim in a production of The Vagina Monologues. Sydney, meanwhile, leaned into her love of animals. She studied animal science at Pierce College, then carved out a reputation in the rodeo world as a barrel racer, horse breeder, and trainer. Her life, however, carried tragedy. In 2000, she married horse breeder William Rocky Foster. But in 2009, just 2 days after Sydney asked for a divorce, Foster died by suicide, a devastating blow that pushed her even further from the public eye. Since then, Sydney has kept her life deeply private, choosing peace over publicity, with no remarriage or children known. Today, Lindsay and Sydney live separate but equally grounded lives, far removed from the Hollywood spotlight. Lindsay resides in California, balancing equine care, athletic coaching, and property management, while enjoying motherhood and occasionally engaging with fans. Sydney continues her quiet life with horses and rodeo pursuits, far from cameras and media attention. Despite the hardships, fans continue to celebrate them not just for being part of Little House history, but for how they've carried themselves since. As one admirer put it, these two beautiful women are more than deserving of praise for the love and kindness they've shown to the LHOTP fan community for years. Others reminded critics that, at the end of the day, they are human beings and have feelings. Don't put the person down. The Greenbush twins may have been limited on screen, but off-screen their stories are layered with resilience, heart, and survival. From Hollywood sets to horse ranches, from youthful fame to private adulthood, they've lived life on their own terms. Proof that even the smallest Ingalls sister left behind a lasting legacy. Victor French, Mr. Edwards. Victor French was born on December 4, 1934 in Santa Barbara, California, into a life already steeped in Hollywood. His father, Ted French, was a stuntman, so the sound stages and dusty Western sets were practically his playground. Following in those footsteps, Victor started small, taking on stunts, walk-on roles, and one-off appearances. With his rugged features and brooding presence, Hollywood quickly cast him as the heavy. He spent much of the 1960s and early 70s as the outlaw, the gunslinger, or the man audiences loved to hate in shows like Bonanza and Gunsmoke. But as fate would have it, one of his guest spots would change his entire trajectory, thanks to Michael Landon. In 1974, French landed the role that turned everything around. Isaiah Edwards, the grizzled but lovable mountain man on Little House on the Prairie. Suddenly, the man who had spent years as a villain was now America's favorite rough-edged softie. Mr. Edwards wasn't just comic relief. He carried some of the show's most emotional storylines, like when he adopted children after tragedy struck. Behind the camera, Michael Landon saw something deeper in French. He wasn't just a character actor, he was a storyteller. Landon trusted him enough to direct nearly 20 episodes of Little House and, later, several installments of Highway to Heaven. That creative partnership became one of the defining relationships of French's career. As beloved as Mr. Edwards was, French carried private frustrations. Hollywood had spent so long typecasting him that even with the success of Little House, he sometimes felt invisible as an actor. He had proven he could deliver humor, warmth, and vulnerability, but he knew how quickly the industry could box someone in. His personal life wasn't without heartbreak either. In 1975, at the height of his run on Little House, he divorced his wife, Judith Shenz, with whom he had 3 children. It wasn't scandalous by Hollywood standards, but it left its mark. Family ties strained just as his career was flourishing. Then came the fight he couldn't outwork or outwit: his health. By 1989, he was diagnosed with advanced lung cancer, a disease that progressed at a terrifying pace. Friends and co-stars recalled how quickly it overtook him, robbing him of time he should have had. After leaving Walnut Grove, French wasn't done working with Michael Landon. The two reunited for Highway to Heaven, where French played Mark Gordon, Landon's right-hand man. Their friendship gave the show a soul, built not just on scripts, but on genuine love and loyalty between two men who had become brothers. When Victor French died on June 15, 1989, at just 54 years old, it shook the Little House family to its core. Landon, who had leaned on French both professionally and personally, was devastated. Tragically, less than 2 years later, Landon himself would also be gone, claimed by pancreatic cancer. For fans, it felt like losing two pillars of the same house within breaths of each other. Victor French never had the glossy Hollywood career of a leading man, but he carved something better. He left audiences with a character they still talk about decades later. Mr. Edwards was rugged, funny, tender, and flawed, much like French himself. And though he may have left too soon, his work alongside Michael Landon guaranteed that his name would always be tied to some of TV's most enduring stories. Which Little House on the Prairie cast member was your favorite? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.